That was the reputation. That was the truth. The black sedan moved through downtown Houston with slow confidence, cutting through late summer heat that made the pavement shimmer. Kevin sat in the back seat, suit pressed sharp, cufflinks catching the orange glow of traffic lights. The city felt arranged in his favor. Construction cranes, new high-rises, renovated blocks, pieces on a board he had influenced one contract at a time. Beside him, Kaisa Hummerland rested her hand lightly on his thigh, scrolling through photos of waterfront estates. "I'm telling you," she said, tilting the screen toward him, "this one photographs well. Clean lines, private dock. It sends the right message." Kevin gave a small nod. He knew what she meant by message. Power, stability, legacy. The car slowed. Red light. A crosswalk signal clicked. Overhead, the street light flickered once, paused, flickered again. Kevin's eyes lifted automatically. That's when he saw her. Claire, standing at the corner in fitted jeans and a soft blue blouse, hair pulled back neatly, posture steady. No designer bag. No security, just her. And two toddlers, one holding each of her hands. The world didn't freeze. It sharpened. The boy on her right looked up first. His jawline, the curve of his brow, the way his mouth tightened slightly before he blinked. Kevin's chest tightened without warning. The girl shifted her weight, brushing curls from her forehead. Same eyes, same quiet intensity he'd seen in the mirror for decades. Not similar, not close, exact. Kaisa followed his line of sight. "Do you know her?" she asked, tone casual but precise. Kevin didn't answer, because something had just rearranged inside him. Claire wasn't scanning traffic. She wasn't searching for him. She was focused on the crosswalk symbol lighting up white. The boy tugged her hand toward a toy display in a nearby window, chattering about something Kevin couldn't hear. The boy laughed. Kevin felt it like a physical hit. The resemblance was not coincidence. It was inheritance. Kaisa shifted slightly beside him. "Kevin?" His throat felt dry. He hadn't experienced surprise like this in years. Surprise meant vulnerability, and he had eliminated vulnerability from his life with discipline. Claire adjusted her grip on the children's hands. The girl looked up, straight toward the car, toward him. Kevin's pulse kicked once, hard. The light changed to green. The driver eased forward. Kevin twisted in his seat, watching through the rear window as Claire and the twins stepped into the crosswalk. He didn't blink. He couldn't. By the time the car cleared the intersection, they were gone behind tinted glass and moving traffic. Kaisa studied him carefully. "You're pale." He leaned back slowly, jaw tight. "It's nothing," but it wasn't nothing. It was 3 years collapsing into one moment. Claire had left without explanation. No fight. No scene. No warning. Just distance. And now she stood in broad daylight, holding 2 children, who looked like living proof that he had been living with a blind spot. His hands tightened against his knees. First emotional peak. Recognition. Have you ever built something so large you forgot why you started building in the first place? Kevin had. He built influence so no one could dismiss him. Built alliances so no one could corner him. Built leverage so no one could leave him. But he had not built a family. Or so he thought. The car moved deeper into downtown, but Kevin wasn't seeing buildings anymore. He was replaying the angle of the boy's face, the way the girl's eyes narrowed with focus. The familiarity wasn't emotional. It was biological. Kaisa broke the silence. If that was someone important, we should handle it properly. Handle it. That word irritated him more than it should have. He exhaled slowly. It was someone I used to know. Used to. The phrase tasted wrong. He turned slightly toward the window again, though the intersection was long gone. Claire had disappeared 3 years ago. At the time, he told himself she couldn't handle pressure, couldn't handle expansion, couldn't handle the scale of what he was building. He never considered another explanation, because men like Kevin don't assume they're the ones who were unfit. But the math was immediate. 3 years, 2 toddlers who appeared around 2.5. The timeline aligned with ruthless precision. His mind ran calculations automatically. Dates, absences, the night she stopped answering calls, the last conversation about timing and risk. Claire had been calm that night. Too calm. The realization landed fully. They're mine. Second emotional peak. The sentence didn't echo dramatically in his head. It settled. Heavy. Certain. He didn't question it. He knew. Kaisa watched him carefully now, reading micro-expressions, the way she read balance sheets. "You're distracted," she said. "Yes," he replied, not bothering to soften it. The driver asked quietly, "Office, sir?" Kevin paused. His schedule was packed. Investors waiting. A strategy call about Dallas territory. A dinner with Kaisa's father. But none of it felt urgent anymore. "Yes," he said finally. Yet as the car continued, he kept looking back at intersections, as if the city might rewind and give him another view. He'd spent years ensuring he knew everything happening within his reach. And somehow, he didn't know he had children walking across his streets. That realization was more destabilizing than any rival. Welcome to Mr. Gerald Family. If stories of forbidden love and dangerous men make your heart race, please support me by subscribing. Help me reach 1,000 subscribers so I can bring you more addictive tales that will leave you breathless. Your support means the world to me. Now let's continue. Because Kevin Jones believed he controlled Houston. He believed nothing moved without crossing his awareness. But the city had just shown him something different. It had shown him two small hands holding onto the woman he once loved, without him. And here's the truth about power. It feels solid until life exposes the gap in your foundation. Kevin leaned back in the seat, eyes forward now, face composed again. Years of discipline slid back into place like armor. But beneath it, something had shifted. Not panic. Not fear. Responsibility. If those children were his, and he was certain they were, then Claire had carried them alone, given birth alone, sat through midnight fevers alone, walked first steps without him, and that thought did something no rival ever managed to do. It made him feel replaceable. Kaisa checked her phone again. "We'll need to finalize guest security for the wedding this week." Kevin stared ahead. Wedding, engagement, merger, public unity, all carefully constructed. But construction means nothing if the foundation cracks. He spoke evenly. "Cancel tonight's dinner with your father." Kaisa looked up sharply. "Excuse me?" "Reschedule it." "That's not wise." "I didn't ask if it was wise." She studied him, reassessing. The car pulled up to his office building, glass reflecting the late sun. Before stepping out, Kevin paused. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't solve with leverage. He thought he controlled the city. He didn't know the city was about to test him. And somewhere 15 minutes away, Claire was probably buckling two toddlers into car seats, unaware that the man who once loved her had just seen his future walking across a crosswalk. The street light had blinked twice. Kevin had noticed. Now he had to decide what noticing meant. Before Houston felt like territory, before Kevin's name carried quiet weight in closed rooms, he met Claire in a place neither of them fully belonged. It was a business networking event hosted inside a downtown hotel ballroom. Polished floors, name tags, forced laughter. Kevin attended to observe. Claire attended because a professor insisted she should. He noticed her first because she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She stood near a refreshment table, listening more than speaking, posture relaxed, eyes alert. When someone exaggerated their achievements, she didn't nod politely. She asked questions that made them clarify. Kevin respected clarity. When he introduced himself, she didn't react to his reputation. She asked where he grew up. "Outside Houston," he replied. "Same," she said. "Different side, I'm guessing." He smiled slightly. "Probably." They spoke for nearly 3 hours. Not about contracts, not about ambition, about childhood routines, about pressure, about the way success isolates you before you realize it's happening. Claire told him she studied business because she wanted ownership to stay inside communities that built things from scratch. Kevin told her he believed power prevented humiliation. They were both honest. That's what pulled them together. In the beginning, their differences felt complementary. Claire valued transparency. She believed in building systems that served people openly. She believed in partnership that didn't require leverage. Kevin believed leverage was protection. That every alliance needed insurance. That power, once secured, ensured safety. You can't trust everyone, he told her one night while they sat in his apartment overlooking the city. I don't, she replied. But I also don't control everyone. He looked at her carefully. Control keeps things stable. Control isolates you, she answered. At the time, he dismissed that as idealism. They loved each other intensely but differently. Claire required honesty. Kevin required loyalty. Those sound similar. They aren't. When his operations expanded, his absences increased. Calls he couldn't take in front of her. Meetings he wouldn't explain. She didn't demand details. She watched patterns. One evening, she said quietly, "You're building something that doesn't have room for me." "That's not true." "Then make room." He didn't know how. The night she told him she was pregnant, rain tapped lightly against the windows of his condo. Claire stood near the kitchen counter, fingers wrapped around a glass of water she hadn't touched. "I went to the doctor today," she said. Kevin sensed tension immediately. "Is everything okay?" She held his gaze. "I'm pregnant." Silence settled between them. Not panic, not joy. Calculation. Kevin sat down slowly. His mind moved through consequences automatically. Expansion plans, rivals, exposure, timing. "How far along?" he asked. "Almost 2 months." He nodded once, absorbing the information. Claire watched him closely. "You're thinking about risk," she said. "I'm thinking about stability," he replied. She took a breath. "I'm thinking about life." That difference defined everything. Kevin began outlining adjustments. Discretion, protection, limited visibility, structured planning. Claire listened. "You're planning containment," she said softly. "I'm planning safety." "For who?" she asked again, the same question she had asked months earlier. He didn't answer directly, because part of him feared that fatherhood would expose weakness. And weakness, in his world, attracted danger. Claire saw that fear. Over the next weeks, Kevin approached the pregnancy like a strategic development. He researched property in safer neighborhoods, considered private medical arrangements, spoke about contingency plans. Claire spoke about names, about family traditions, about how she wanted their child to grow up hearing music in the kitchen and laughter in the living room. "You can't structure every breath," she told him one night. "I can minimize risk." Risk isn't the only thing that shapes a child. He grew frustrated. "You think I don't care?" "I think you care about control more than connection." That statement stayed with him long after she left. Kevin wasn't heartless. He was conditioned. Conditioned to treat uncertainty like an enemy. Claire didn't see uncertainty as something to conquer. She saw it as something to navigate with trust. They weren't fighting each other. They were defending different philosophies. The day she left was quiet. No screaming. No dramatic goodbye. Kevin returned home to find her side of the closet empty. Bathroom drawers cleared. A single note placed on the kitchen counter. Not accusatory. Not emotional. Just direct. "I need space to build what you're not ready to protect the right way." He read it twice, then folded it carefully. He told himself she was overwhelmed, that she would return once she understood the security he was creating. He did not consider that she was choosing a different definition of security. Weeks passed. Her number disconnected. Her apartment lease terminated. He searched discreetly but not aggressively. Pride kept him from chasing publicly. Eventually, he framed the story in a way that preserved his ego. She couldn't handle the pressure. That was easier than admitting he couldn't adjust. Now, 3 years later, standing at a red light, that quiet departure made sense in a way it never had before. She hadn't run from him. She had run toward protection. Kevin's office overlooked the Houston skyline, glass reflecting a city he had spent years shaping quietly. He dismissed his assistant early. No meetings, no calls unless urgent. By the time darkness settled over downtown, he was still seated behind his desk, untouched drink beside him, jacket removed but composure intact. On the surface, he replayed the intersection again. Claire's posture, the boy's profile, the girl's eyes. He opened his laptop and pulled up archived dates. Travel logs, calendar entries from 3 years ago, the timeline aligned with uncomfortable precision. He leaned back slowly. 3 years. 3 years of believing he had been abandoned. 3 years of expanding operations under the assumption that there was nothing left to lose. Now the math told him something else entirely. He wasn't abandoned. He was excluded. There's a difference. His phone buzzed once. A message from Kaisa. Dinner postponed? My father isn't pleased. Kevin stared at the screen. He typed a short reply. Tomorrow. No explanation. He set the phone face down. For the first time in years, a negotiation table felt less urgent than a crosswalk. He left the office later than usual, but instead of heading home, he drove himself. No driver, no escort, just him behind the wheel of a dark SUV, cutting through side streets 15 minutes from downtown. He didn't know exactly where Claire lived, but he knew the direction she had walked from that intersection. Kevin parked near a small shopping strip and sat in silence. What exactly was he doing? Waiting. Waiting wasn't his habit. He watched families move in and out of a grocery store. Parents carrying tired children. Couples arguing softly over forgotten items. Normal life. Unprotected life. He had spent years ensuring he didn't blend into spaces like this. Tonight he wanted to. At nearly 8:30, he saw her. Claire stepped out of a small bookstore, one child on either side. No stroller this time. The boy carried a small paper bag. The girl held a thin picture book against her chest like it was fragile. They walked toward a compact SUV parked under a street lamp. Kevin's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. He stepped out of his vehicle before he could reconsider. Claire noticed him immediately. Her body didn't jerk. It steadied. That told him everything about her growth. The twins continued walking until they sensed her slowing. They looked up. Kevin stopped several feet away, hands visible, posture controlled, but not imposing. For a moment, none of them spoke. You followed me? Claire asked calmly. I saw you earlier, he replied. I know. The boy studied him openly. The girl leaned slightly against Claire's leg. Kevin kept his voice even. We need to talk. Claire considered that, then nodded toward a nearby park bench across the small lot. 5 minutes. She led the twins to the bench first, sat them between herself and Kevin. Public space, visible lighting, intentional positioning. Kevin noticed. She wasn't careless. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable in ways that didn't rely on shock anymore. It was in micro-expressions, in the way the boy's eyebrows lifted when curious, in how the girl tilted her head slightly, before asking something. Kevin crouched to their eye level. Hi, he said gently. I'm Kevin. The boy looked at Claire. Mama. Claire nodded once. It's okay. The boy extended his hand with bold innocence. I'm Kai. The name settled into Kevin's chest. Kai, he repeated carefully. The girl shifted closer. I'm Taylor. He met her eyes. Taylor. Claire watched him like someone assessing structural integrity. Kevin stood slowly, facing her now. They're mine. It wasn't spoken with disbelief this time. It was recognition. Claire held his gaze. Yes. No drama. No tears. Just fact. How long have you known? He asked. Since the doctor confirmed. You were going to tell me? When I believed it wouldn't endanger them. The boy tugged at Kevin's pant legs suddenly. You look like me, Kai said. The words were simple. Unfiltered. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Kevin felt something settle heavily inside him. Not shock, not anger. Something weightier. Responsibility doesn't arrive loudly. It lands. He looked at Kai carefully. I guess I do. Taylor studied his face with analytical focus. Mama says everyone has a story. Kevin almost smiled. That's true. Claire stood. 5 minutes are up. He rose with her. You don't get to walk in and out of their lives, she said quietly, ensuring the children couldn't hear the edge beneath her calm tone. I'm not here to visit, he replied. Then what are you here for? He hesitated, not because he lacked an answer, but because he wasn't used to saying it aloud. To understand what I missed. Claire's expression softened by a fraction, but not enough to mistake for forgiveness. You missed first steps, first words, fevers, birthdays. Each word was measured. Kevin absorbed it without defense. I can't undo that. No, she agreed. You can't. Silence passed between them. The kind that doesn't need volume to carry weight. Kai reached for Kevin's hand without overthinking it. That small gesture altered something fundamental. Not in the city, not in Kevin's network, in him. He looked down at their joined hands. 3 years ago, he viewed fatherhood as exposure. Standing there under dim park lighting, he understood it differently. Exposure wasn't the danger. Absence was. Claire adjusted Taylor's book under her arm. "We have a routine," she said. He nodded. "Tell me what it is." That answer surprised even him. Claire searched his face again, this time longer. "You don't get immediate trust. I'm not asking for it. You follow structure. I will." She studied him one more moment, then gave a single instruction. "Sunday, noon, public park, no security." Kevin nodded once. "Sunday, noon." Kai squeezed his hand once before letting go. As Claire guided them toward their vehicle, Kevin remained still. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt accountable, and accountability was heavier than power ever had been. He watched until their car pulled away. Only then did he return to his own. As he sat behind the wheel, one realization became unavoidable. He had built an empire that answered to him. Now he faced 2 small lives that wouldn't. And for the first time, that felt like something worth earning. Sunday arrived without ceremony. Kevin parked 1 block away from the public park, exactly at 11:52 a.m. He stepped out alone. No driver, no security vehicle trailing behind, no subtle perimeter watch. He had canceled a high-level meeting that morning. He told himself it was strategic flexibility. But he knew better. Claire was already there when he entered the park. Kai was chasing pigeons near a bench. Taylor sat cross-legged on the grass, flipping through a picture book with intense concentration. Claire stood nearby, alert but composed. Kevin approached slowly. "You're early," she said. "I don't like being late. This isn't a boardroom." "I know." That small correction landed. She didn't waste time. "We need structure," Claire said. "I agree." She studied his tone, testing it. "You don't show up randomly." "I won't." "You don't disappear without explanation." "I won't." "You don't bring gifts to compensate for absence." He hesitated slightly. "Understood." "You don't send anyone to watch from a distance." He held her gaze. "No one is here. I'll know if that changes." He believed her. Claire wasn't bluffing. She had always had instincts he respected. She continued. "You don't promise things you can't guarantee." That one cut deeper. "I won't," he said quietly. She nodded once. "Good. Then today you sit, you listen. You don't try to impress them." He almost smiled. "I don't need to." Exactly. Kevin had arrived empty-handed. That was intentional. He had considered bringing something small, neutral. A book. A toy train for Kai. But Claire's words echoed. "You don't buy childhood." So he came with nothing but time. Kai ran toward them suddenly, out of breath. "You're back," he said bluntly. "Yes. You coming tomorrow too?" Kevin paused carefully. "When your mom says it's okay." Kai considered that answer seriously, then nodded as if approving. Taylor looked up from her book. "Do you read?" she asked. "Yes." "Prove it." Kevin blinked once. Claire crossed her arms, observing. Taylor handed him the book without ceremony. He sat on the grass, suit pants touching dirt, and began reading aloud. His voice, usually firm in negotiations, adjusted unconsciously. Softer, slower. Kai leaned against his side halfway through the story without asking permission. Kevin didn't move. He stayed steady. Kevin felt exposed. Not physically, psychologically. For years, he had moved with protection layers. Men positioned discreetly. Vehicles staged for exit routes. Eyes watching. Now he sat in open space surrounded by strangers. Parents pushing strollers. Couples jogging past. Teenagers on bicycles. Anyone could approach. Anyone could observe. And for the first time, that thought didn't irritate him. It unsettled him because it forced him into normalcy. Claire sat across from him, reading his posture like data. "You're scanning," she said quietly. "Habit. Break it." He exhaled slowly and shifted his focus fully to Taylor's page. Kai tugged his sleeve. "Race me," he demanded. Kevin stood. They ran across uneven grass. Kevin didn't let him win easily, but he didn't dominate either. Kai collapsed in laughter when he reached the tree first. "You're slow," Kai announced proudly. Kevin allowed the accusation. "I'll train harder." Claire watched that exchange carefully. He wasn't performing. He was adjusting. Midway through the visit, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He ignored it. A second vibration followed. Claire noticed. "You should check it," she said evenly. "It can wait." "That's new." Kevin met her eyes briefly. Yes, it wasn't easy. His entire life functioned on responsiveness. Delay signaled weakness. But right now, responding would signal priority, and he was choosing differently. Later, while Kai insisted Kevin attempt to climb the playground structure, Kevin nearly slipped on a metal rung. Taylor gasped dramatically. "You don't know how?" she asked. "Not recently." "Practice," she instructed seriously. Claire hid a smile. Humility doesn't arrive through speeches. It arrives through awkward moments in public parks. And Kevin was living one. As noon passed into early afternoon, the atmosphere shifted slightly. Claire checked her watch. "We leave in 10 minutes. Kevin nodded. Kai frowned. "Already?" "We have routines," Claire reminded gently. Kevin crouched in front of them. "I'll see you next Sunday," he said. Claire didn't correct him. That was intentional. Taylor studied him closely. "You're not wearing a ring," she observed. Kevin froze for half a second. Claire stiffened. "Children notice everything. It's complicated," he replied evenly. Taylor accepted that with a thoughtful nod. Kai asked suddenly, "Are you my dad?" The question landed without warning. Claire inhaled sharply. Kevin didn't look at her. He looked at Kai. Yes. Simple. Clear. No qualification. Kai processed that for a moment, then said, "Okay," and ran back toward the bench. Claire stepped closer to Kevin. "That answer changes things," she said quietly. "It should have been said already." She searched his face again. "You understand this isn't a trial period?" "Yes." "You understand showing up means restructuring parts of your life?" "Yes." She studied him for several seconds. Then she nodded once. "Next Sunday. Same time." Kevin stepped back, allowing her space. As she walked away with Kai and Taylor, he felt something unfamiliar. Not dominance, not relief. Pressure, because structure had been set, and structure requires consistency. He watched them until they disappeared past the park entrance. Only then did he retrieve his phone. 6 missed calls. 3 messages from Kaisa, 1 from an associate regarding movement in Dallas territory. The world he controlled had continued without him for 2 hours. And somehow, that didn't feel like loss. It felt like recalibration. The invitation came midweek. It wasn't dramatic. Claire called him on Thursday evening. "We're having dinner at my mother's on Sunday," she said. "You can come." "Not you should. Not you're welcome. You can." Kevin leaned back in his office chair. "I'll be there. 3 o'clock. I won't be late." A pause. "No security," she added. "I know." She hung up without further commentary. That was Claire's style. No extra language. No cushioning. Sunday arrived warm and bright. Kevin drove himself again, leaving the familiar grid of downtown for a neighborhood that felt lived in rather than constructed. Brick houses, lawns cut unevenly but cared for, basketball hoops above garages, folding chairs visible on porches. He parked on the street. No tinted convoy, no presence signaling control, just him, walking up a short concrete path. The front door opened before he knocked. Claire stood there, expression neutral. "They're in the backyard," she said. He stepped inside. The house smelled like seasoned food and something sweet baking. Voices overlapped from different rooms. Laughter, debate, someone calling for a missing serving spoon. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't curated. It was alive. Kevin paused briefly in the entryway, adjusting internally. He wasn't used to environments where no one deferred automatically. The backyard held a long folding table lined with trays of food. Kai ran past him with a plastic airplane. Taylor followed, carrying a juice box. Conversations continued without stopping to acknowledge Kevin immediately. Claire didn't announce him. She let him stand there. Eventually, eyes turned. Measured. Curious. Assessing. Kevin nodded politely to those who looked at him. No one rushed forward. Claire moved naturally through the space, greeting relatives, adjusting plates, checking on the grill. Kevin stood slightly apart, hands loosely at his sides. Kai ran up and grabbed his hand. "You came," he said. "I said I would." That small exchange shifted attention subtly. Taylor approached more cautiously. "You know how to read better now?" she asked. "I've been practicing." She seemed satisfied. Gradually, a few relatives approached. Polite introductions, firm handshakes, direct eye contact. No one mentioned his reputation. They mentioned the weather, the traffic, the twins' energy levels. It felt intentional. They weren't impressed. They were evaluating consistency. Kevin sat at the long table when food was served. Plates passed from hand to hand. Conversations overlapped. Someone teased Kai about running too fast. Taylor corrected a cousin's grammar with serious precision. Kevin observed the dynamic carefully. This wasn't hierarchical. This was shared space. At one point, a relative asked casually, "So what do you do?" Kevin considered the simplest version of truth. "I manage investments," he said. That wasn't a lie. It just wasn't complete. The relative nodded without digging further. Claire watched him from across the table. She noticed he didn't dominate conversation, didn't redirect attention, didn't posture. That mattered. But discomfort still lingered. Kevin wasn't fluent in environments where emotional transparency was casual. When someone joked about overcooking the ribs, everyone laughed loudly. Kevin smiled, but slightly delayed. He was calibrating in real time. Later, after plates were cleared and the children drifted toward a group activity near the fence, Claire's mother approached him directly. She didn't sit beside him. She stood. "You understand something?" she said evenly. Kevin met her gaze. "I'm listening. My daughter raised those children without you." "Yes. She didn't ask you for help." "I know. And now you want to be present." "Yes." Her eyes didn't soften. "Presence isn't performance." "I'm not performing. You've built a life where people move when you signal. That doesn't apply here." "I understand." She leaned slightly closer. "Do you?" Kevin held her gaze without defensiveness. "I didn't understand 3 years ago," he said. "I do now." She studied him carefully. "You here to visit?" she asked quietly. "Or you here to stay?" The backyard noise faded in his awareness. This wasn't about reputation. It was about endurance. "I'm here to learn how to stay." The words were deliberate, not polished. Claire, standing several feet away, heard them. She didn't react visibly, but she heard. Her mother held his gaze for another long moment. "Learning takes time," she said. "I have it." "Good." She turned and walked away without further approval. Kevin exhaled slowly. That exchange had carried more weight than any boardroom negotiation he'd handled that year, because there was no leverage here, only observation. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, Kevin found himself sitting on the grass beside Kai, helping assemble a small plastic airplane that required more patience than expected. Taylor corrected his placement of a wing piece. "That's wrong," she said calmly. "You're right," he admitted. She nodded, satisfied with the correction. Claire sat nearby, watching without interfering. At one point, she caught his eye. There was no forgiveness in her expression, but there was acknowledgement. He had entered her world without attempting to reshape it. That was new. As the sun dipped lower, Kevin stood to leave. He approached Claire quietly. "Thank you," he said. "This wasn't for you," she replied. "It was for them." "I know." She studied him again. "You're stepping into more than fatherhood. I'm aware. You don't get applause for basic responsibility. I'm not looking for it." A slight pause. "Next Sunday," she said. "I'll be there." He walked back to his car under fading light. No one escorted him. No one warned him. No one deferred. And yet, for the first time in a long while, he felt something resembling alignment. Not power. Alignment. As he drove away, his phone buzzed again. Kaisa. He let it ring once before answering. "We need to talk," she said sharply. "Yes," he replied evenly. "We do." Kevin met Kaisa the following evening at her penthouse downtown. She didn't greet him with a kiss. She didn't offer a drink. She stood near the window overlooking the city, arms folded, posture rigid. You've been unreachable, she said. I've been occupied. With what? Kevin didn't soften it. My children. Silence followed. Not confusion. Calculation. Kaisa walked toward the dining table slowly. How long? She asked. 3 years. Her jaw tightened slightly. With Claire. Yes. She let out a short breath through her nose. And you just found out? I just saw them. She studied his face carefully. You're certain? Yes. She nodded once, absorbing it like financial data. This complicates timing. Timing of what? Our merger. Public positioning. Narrative control. There it was. Not emotional hurt. Not jealousy. Optics. They're not part of your narrative, Kevin replied. They become part of it if discovered. They aren't hidden. That shifted something in her expression. You plan to acknowledge them publicly? Yes. Kaisa's voice cooled further. You're exposing vulnerability. They're my responsibility. And responsibility can be weaponized. Kevin didn't respond immediately. Because she wasn't wrong. 2 nights later, Kevin attended a private dinner at the Hummarland estate. Long, polished table. Controlled lighting. Carefully plated courses. Kaisa sat across from him. Her father sat at the head of the table. Conversation began with neutral topics. Market expansion, regulatory adjustments, investment shifts. Then it pivoted. We've reviewed certain developments, her father said smoothly. Kevin remained composed. Which developments? The existence of children tied to you. The phrasing was deliberate. Tied to me? Kevin repeated evenly. Biologically connected, he clarified. Yes, Kevin replied. My children. A pause. Kaisa interjected. We can contain this. Kevin glanced at her briefly. Contain what? The narrative, she said. Discretion. Trust funds structured quietly. Limited exposure. They're not a scandal, Kevin said calmly. They're leverage, her father corrected. The word hung in the air. Kevin didn't react outwardly. But internally, something shifted. Leverage how? He asked. Rivals monitor weaknesses. Family creates pressure points. Kevin folded his hands on the table. They're not weaknesses. They are variables, her father replied. There was no hostility in his tone. Just strategy. Kaisa leaned forward slightly. If we move quickly, we control information. If we delay, others control it. Kevin considered that carefully. You've already run background checks, he said. Her father didn't deny it. Standard procedure. On Claire. On Kai. On Taylor. That realization landed harder than expected. They're not assets, Kevin said. They are exposure, Kaisa replied. Kevin held her gaze. You're talking about my children. I'm talking about risk management. The distinction was clear. And cold. As dinner continued, proposals were outlined with clinical precision. Trust accounts under layered structures. Discrete educational placements. Private security integrated without visibility. Kevin listened. But something no longer aligned. You're planning contingencies as if they're hostages, he said evenly. That's dramatic, Kaisa replied. No, he said. It's accurate. Her father set his fork down carefully. Emotional language doesn't change structural realities. Kevin's voice remained controlled. They're not structural. They affect structure, he said calmly. Kaisa watched Kevin closely. You're reacting differently than expected. Explain. You usually prioritize stability. I still do. Then this is simple. We reduce exposure. Kevin leaned back slightly. And if I don't? Her father's eyes narrowed just slightly. Then you accept volatility. Volatility. Market language applied to children. Kevin understood markets. He understood power shifts. He also understood something else now. Claire had been right 3 years ago. You can't build a future on fear. He rose slowly. I'll consider your proposals. Kaisa stood as well. Consider quickly. He didn't respond. He left the estate without looking back. By the time Kevin returned to his office the next morning, information had already begun circulating. One of his trusted contacts delivered a short message. Some smaller crews had been asking about a woman matching Claire's description. Kevin didn't show reaction. Specifics? Not yet. Just curiosity. Curiosity spreads fast in his world. especially when patterns change. He had been seen at a public park. Twice, no escort. That alone raised questions. Another message arrived minutes later. Dallas Group probing expansion routes earlier than expected. Pressure was converging. Personal exposure, territorial testing, corporate maneuvering, all at once. Kevin closed his office door. For years, he believed he could compartmentalize. Business here, emotion there, control everywhere. Now those compartments were collapsing. He stood at the window overlooking Houston. The skyline still looked stable, but stability is perception. He replayed the dinner conversation, leverage, exposure, volatility. Then he replayed Kai's voice. "Are you my dad?" Yes, that word had shifted everything. If rivals discovered the children fully, they could test him through intimidation. If the Hammerlands decided to protect their position aggressively, they could exploit information quietly. If he did nothing, Claire and the twins could become collateral. That possibility sharpened his focus immediately. Kevin didn't panic. He recalibrated. First step, reduce visible risk. Second step, reassess alliances. Third step, determine who already knew. His phone buzzed again. Kaisa. He let it ring once before answering. "We need clarity," she said. "You'll have it," he replied evenly. "When?" "Soon. You don't have the luxury of delay." He looked out over the city again. "I don't intend to delay." He ended the call without further explanation. Kevin had built his empire on anticipating threats. But this was different. This wasn't about dominance. It was about protection. And protection required choices. Not speeches. Not image control. Choices. He reached for his jacket. Because the next move wouldn't happen in a boardroom. It would happen closer to Claire's world. And this time, he would approach it differently. By midweek, Kevin noticed the pattern tightening. Vehicles parked twice near Claire's neighborhood that didn't belong. A dark sedan idling longer than necessary. 2 unfamiliar faces inside a convenience store 3 blocks from her townhouse. Nothing aggressive, just visible enough to be intentional. Kevin didn't overreact. He confirmed quietly. Yes, rival crews had begun mapping softer zones. Yes, questions about family were circulating. Yes, the park visits had been noticed. The mistake wasn't theirs. It was his. Predictability creates openings. Kevin stood in his office early that morning, reviewing footage pulled from public traffic cameras near Claire's street. He wasn't guessing anymore. They were watching, testing. Not to strike immediately, but to measure response. In his world, information moved like currency. Someone wanted to see how he would value this. Claire called him at 4:17 p.m. Her voice wasn't panicked. It was tight. "There's a car outside that's been there since lunch," she said. Kevin didn't waste time pretending ignorance. "What color?" "Dark gray, 2 men, windows down." "Do they approach?" "No, but they're not subtle." He exhaled slowly. "Stay inside." "I already am." "Lock everything." "It's locked." He was already moving. Not with a convoy. Not loud. He drove alone. Because Claire's rules still applied. No visible security. But this was no longer about optics. When Kevin pulled onto her street, the gray sedan was still there. 2 men inside. Watching the house, Kevin parked 3 houses down. He didn't rush. He walked. Calm. Measured. The men noticed him approaching. Recognition hit their faces almost instantly. Kevin stopped beside their car. He didn't raise his voice. "You're in the wrong neighborhood," he said. One of them tried to smile casually. "Just passing through." "You've been passing through for 3 hours." Silence. Kevin leaned slightly closer to the driver's window. "If you're curious about me," he said quietly, "ask directly. Don't circle children." The driver swallowed. Message received. Kevin stepped back. They didn't argue. They drove off within seconds. No confrontation needed. Respect, when established, carries weight. Kevin remained standing in the street for a few moments after they left. He didn't feel victorious. He felt exposed. Because now it was confirmed. Claire's world was on the board. Claire opened the door before he knocked. She had already seen the exchange from the front window. "You brought this here," she said immediately. Her voice wasn't loud. It was restrained anger. I didn't bring them, Kevin replied. They were testing. They were watching my house. Yes, my children were inside. I know. That's exactly what I refused, she said. He stepped inside without being invited fully. The twins were in the living room, building something out of blocks, unaware. Kevin lowered his voice. I handled it. For today, silence. Claire crossed her arms. This is the world I refused. There it was. Not accusation. Truth. Kevin didn't defend himself. You were right, he said quietly. That doesn't solve it. No. You said you would follow structure. I did. You said no security. I kept that. And still they showed up. Kevin looked toward the living room briefly. That's on me. Claire's jaw tightened. You don't get to experiment with safety. I'm not experimenting. Then what are you doing? He took a breath before answering. Adjusting. She shook her head slightly. You can't adjust fast enough to outpace what you built. That statement landed harder than she intended. Kevin stepped closer. I won't let anything happen to them. That's what every powerful man says before something does. He didn't respond immediately, because he knew she wasn't speaking theoretically. You think a calm conversation in the street fixes this? Claire continued. No. Do you know what it feels like to look through your blinds and see strangers studying your home? Yes. She paused. That surprised her. I grew up in it, he continued. I know exactly what it feels like. And you chose to build more of it. Yes. No excuses. No deflection. That honesty disrupted her anger slightly. She walked to the window and looked out. They won't stop, she said quietly. Not immediately. And you? I'll make it clear the boundary is not negotiable. How? By changing the structure, they think they understand. She turned back toward him. That's not specific. It will be. Claire looked toward Kai and Taylor again. They deserve quiet, she said. I know. You can't protect them with intimidation. I'm not planning to. She studied him carefully. What are you planning? Kevin hesitated. Because the truth was forming in real time. I'm planning to reduce the surface area, he said. Meaning, less exposure. Fewer loose alliances. Fewer unpredictable players. That costs you, yes. She held his gaze for several seconds. If this continues, she said slowly, access changes. He nodded once. I understand. And if I decide to leave again? His throat tightened slightly. I won't stop you. That answer cost him something. Claire saw it, and for the first time since the street incident, fear entered his expression. Not fear of rivals. Fear of losing them again. Kai ran into the hallway suddenly. Are we having dinner now? He asked. Claire softened instantly. Soon, she replied. Kevin crouched. You building something big? He asked. Kai grinned. It's a city. Kevin swallowed slightly. Make sure it has strong walls, Kai added proudly. Kevin met Claire's eyes. Walls weren't the solution. Not this time. As he left her townhouse that evening, he didn't feel controlled. He felt cornered. And cornered men make decisions. The difference now was simple. He wasn't deciding for dominance. He was deciding for protection. Kevin didn't return to his penthouse that night. He went to his office instead. The building was nearly empty. Only emergency lighting and distant elevator sounds broke the silence. He removed his jacket and stood at the window overlooking Houston. 3 years ago, he would have interpreted the gray sedan as routine testing. A small crew probing territory. An opportunity to reassert dominance. Tonight, it felt different. Because it wasn't about him. It was about Claire looking through blinds. It was about Kai building a city out of blocks, while men studied the real one outside. He had built a structure where intimidation maintained order. Now that structure created risk around the only thing that mattered. He closed his eyes briefly. Empire or intimacy. The phrase wasn't poetic. It was logistical. He couldn't operate at full scale and promise invisible safety at the same time. Not in this city, not with these rivals, and not with the Hammarlands calculating exposure from another angle. He sat down at his desk and opened a secure file. Expansion projections, Dallas routes, new partnerships in negotiation, high-yield operations that required visible strength. He stared at the numbers. Then he began cutting. First, he paused the Dallas push. Aggressive expansion invited scrutiny. He sent a short directive: postpone advancement, reassess logistics. Second, he withdrew from 2 partnerships known for volatility, profitable, efficient, reckless. He had tolerated their methods because they delivered results quickly. Now quick wasn't acceptable. Third, he reduced physical presence in certain contested zones. Less movement, less signaling, less noise. These weren't emotional decisions. They were structural contractions, and contraction meant vulnerability in a different form. Within hours, his phone began lighting up. Why are we pulling back? This creates space for others. Are we losing ground? Kevin answered minimally. We're repositioning. He didn't elaborate. Because elaboration suggested doubt, but internally, doubt existed. Was he weakening his network? Was he signaling softness? Or was he finally correcting overreach? He leaned back and replayed Claire's words. You can't adjust fast enough to outpace what you built. She might have been right, but he could reduce its reach. By morning, the financial implications were visible. Projected revenue dipped sharply for the quarter. 2 investors requested clarification. A longtime associate questioned his judgment openly. Since when do we step back? The associate asked over a secure line. Since now, Kevin replied evenly. Because of family? Kevin paused. Yes. Silence followed. That's dangerous. Expansion without control is more dangerous. You built this on pressure. I'm rebuilding it on precision. He ended the call without waiting for approval. This wasn't a popular move. Aggressive growth had defined his rise. Retreat suggested hesitation, but he wasn't retreating entirely. He was narrowing, refining, removing unstable variables. He redirected funds toward legitimate infrastructure ventures already operating quietly under his influence. Projects that created visible benefit instead of intimidation. Slower returns, lower margins, more transparency. The shift was subtle from the outside. From the inside, it felt seismic. By the end of the week, measurable losses were undeniable. One partnership terminated entirely. A shipping contract rerouted elsewhere. A development deal stalled due to perceived instability. Kevin sat with spreadsheets reflecting contraction, not collapse, but contraction. His phone buzzed again. Kaisa, he answered. I'm seeing movement, she said immediately. Yes. You're scaling back. Yes. Because of them? Yes. She didn't raise her voice. You're destabilizing your own leverage. I'm stabilizing something else. You think smaller visibility equals safety? I think reckless visibility equals exposure. There was a pause on the line. This affects our merger timeline, she said. Kevin stared at the skyline again. That timeline may change. Another pause. Be careful, she said. Of what? Becoming sentimental. He ended the call without replying. Sentiment wasn't driving this. Fear was, but not fear of rivals. Fear of losing access to Kai and Taylor because he failed to adapt fast enough. That night, Kevin sat alone in his office again. The city lights reflected against the glass like scattered signals. For years he equated power with insulation. The more territory he controlled, the safer he felt. Now he understood something he had ignored. The larger the footprint, the more entry points existed. Intimacy demanded smaller footprints. Empire demanded expansion. He couldn't maximize both. He thought about Kai asking, "Are you my dad?" He thought about Claire standing in the doorway saying, "This is the world I refused." He thought about Kaisa labeling children variables. 3 value systems, only one aligned with peace. Kevin opened another file and flagged 2 more operations for suspension. Financial impact would increase, so would resistance. But clarity was forming. He wasn't dismantling everything. He was trimming what threatened what mattered most. He sent a final message before leaving the office. All visible expansion paused until further notice. That message would ripple. Rivals would test. Partners would question. The Hammarlunds would calculate, and Kevin would absorb it. Because for the first time, the cost of ego outweighed the cost of contraction. As he locked his office door and stepped into the elevator, One truth settled firmly. He could survive reduced profit. He could survive diminished dominance. He could not survive losing them again. The first sign wasn't dramatic. It was a discrepancy. Kevin reviewed a transaction report late Friday evening. One of the redirected development funds had encountered unusual resistance, an overlapping claim from a subsidiary he didn't recognize. He traced it. Layered ownership. Shell entities nested inside holding companies, all tied to Hammarlund capital structures. At first, it looked like strategic positioning, then he followed the secondary flow. Funds were moving quietly into a smaller syndicate operating along Dallas routes, the same group that had begun probing his edges. Kevin sat still for several seconds. He ran the numbers again. The percentages matched. The timing matched. The withdrawal of his expansion coincided with an increase in their liquidity. He didn't jump to conclusions. He gathered documentation, cross-referenced timestamps, tracked signatures. One signature appeared repeatedly. Kaisa Hammarlund, not passive approval. Active authorization. Kevin leaned back in his chair slowly. This wasn't oversight. It was duplication. She wasn't just merging with him. She was financing alternatives. He requested a private meeting. Not at the estate, not at her penthouse. Neutral ground, a private conference room inside a commercial building downtown. Kaisa arrived precisely on time. Composed. Unrattled. "You sounded urgent," she said. Kevin placed a folder on the table and slid it toward her. She opened it calmly. Her expression didn't collapse. It sharpened. "You've been funding the Dallas group," he said evenly. "Diversification," she replied. "They've been testing my territory. Competition stabilizes markets." Kevin studied her carefully. "You're financing both sides." She closed the folder. "It ensures leverage regardless of outcome." There it was again. Leverage. "You plan to weaken my expansion," he said. "I plan to control it. You're absorbing it." "Yes." No apology. No denial. Clear confirmation. Kevin sat back slowly. "You were never stabilizing my empire," he said. "I was future-proofing mine." The room felt colder. "Marriage consolidates assets," Kaisa continued calmly. "Your infrastructure, our capital. It creates seamless transition." "Transition to what?" he asked. "To majority control over logistics and real estate channels you built." She didn't flinch under his stare. "You were positioning to acquire me," Kevin said. "Partnership implies mutual gain. That's not what this is." Kaisa leaned forward slightly. "You built something impressive, but you built it alone. That makes it vulnerable. You were going to make it dependent. Dependent structures are easier to regulate." Kevin let that sit. "You miscalculated," he said. "How?" "You assumed I would prioritize scale over autonomy." She studied him. "You usually do." "Not anymore." She stood slowly. "You're reacting emotionally." "No," he replied. "I'm reacting strategically. Ending this would destabilize you. Continuing it would erase me." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Because of Claire?" "Because of clarity." Kaisa's jaw tightened. "You're making decisions based on sentiment. I'm making decisions based on alignment." There was no anger in his voice. Just certainty. For years, Kevin believed he was the dominant force in negotiations. He had assumed the Hammarlunds needed his access more than he needed their capital. Now he saw the broader design. Gradual integration, financial entanglement, asset absorption, public marriage, legitimizing transfer of influence. His empire would remain visible, but ownership would shift. He would become the operational face of something he no longer controlled. Kaisa hadn't been preparing to stand beside him. She had been preparing to stand above him. And if the Dallas syndicate gained strength under her funding, they could pressure him from outside while she restructured him from within. It was elegant, cold, and efficient. "You underestimated me," Kaisa said quietly. Kevin met her gaze. "No," he replied. "I underestimated what you wanted." She closed the folder and pushed it back toward him. "You don't have proof of intent. I don't need it. You'll lose access to capital. I'll survive. You'll lose protection. I'll adapt. You'll lose the wedding. That's fine." That answer finally cracked her composure slightly. "You would dismantle this over children?" Kevin stood. "I would dismantle this over ownership." She studied him carefully. "You're shrinking. I'm refining. That makes you smaller. That makes me precise." Silence filled the room. Kaisa adjusted her blazer. "If you end this, you become exposed." Kevin paused at the door. "I already am." He left, without looking back. Inside the elevator, Kevin felt something unfamiliar. Not rage, not panic. Release. The illusion of partnership had been heavier than he realized. He stepped into the lobby and out into Houston's late afternoon heat. The city looked the same, but its structure had changed in his mind. He had built outward for years. Now he would build inward. No offshore dependencies, no layered absorption, no silent leverage tied to marriage contracts. Claire had once told him, "You're building something that doesn't have room for me." Kaisa had been building something that didn't have room for him. The difference was intention. Claire left to protect. Kaisa aligned to control. Kevin got into his car and sat still for a moment. He wasn't naive. Ending this would trigger reaction. Financial pressure, territorial testing, narrative attacks. But something inside him had shifted permanently. He was no longer choosing expansion as proof of worth. He was choosing ownership as protection. And for the first time, he understood something clearly. He had not been negotiating a merger. He had been negotiating his own disappearance. That realization sealed the decision. The wedding would not happen, not as planned. And when it ended, it would not end quietly. The Hammerland estate stood outside Houston on manicured acreage that felt removed from ordinary life. White stone exterior, tall glass windows reflecting early afternoon sun, valet attendants in coordinated black suits directing luxury vehicles along a curved driveway. Guests arrived in waves: developers, political donors, banking executives, select media representatives invited under the language of private ceremony. Inside, a string quartet played softly near the grand staircase. Everything was polished. Everything was intentional. Kevin arrived alone, no convoy, no visible entourage. He stepped out of his car in a tailored black suit, expression steady. Several guests turned immediately. There he was, the man merging private power with institutional wealth. The symbolism wasn't subtle. Kevin walked through the open doors without hesitation. He had already decided. Inside, marble floors reflected chandeliers suspended from ceilings high enough to feel theatrical. Floral arrangements lined the aisle in symmetrical precision. White roses, gold accents, subtle fragrance in the air. A raised platform stood at the far end of the room where the officiant waited near a polished podium. Large windows overlooked rolling green landscape that suggested permanence. Kevin paused briefly near the entrance, not from doubt, from assessment. Cameras positioned discreetly along walls. Private security near exit corridors. Strategic seating arrangement. Hammerland family at the front. Political allies 2 rows behind. Investors clustered together to the right. This wasn't only a wedding. It was a consolidation ceremony. He moved toward the front as conversations softened. Kaisa appeared at the top of the staircase moments later. White gown tailored perfectly. Expression composed. No visible anxiety. She descended slowly, every movement controlled. Applause began softly. Kevin watched her approach. Not emotionally, analytically. He had once believed she represented stability. Now he understood she represented absorption. She reached his side. "You look resolved," she said quietly. "I am." "Good," she replied, assuming alignment. They turned toward the officiant together. Outside the estate gates, reporters gathered behind controlled barriers. The official narrative described the union as a strategic alignment of influence and finance. Photographers waited for post-ceremony access. Inside, subtle recording equipment captured key moments for selective release. Kevin was aware of all of it. He had allowed it to proceed, because the setting would amplify the decision. When you dismantle something public, you do it publicly. The officiant began. "Today we gather to witness the union of 2 powerful legacies." Kevin listened without reacting. Powerful, legacy, union, words chosen carefully. Across the room, Kaisa's father watched with quiet satisfaction. His posture suggested completion. Kevin kept his breathing steady. He felt no panic, no uncertainty, only clarity. As vows approached, Kevin's mind moved once more through the consequences. Ending this here would sever access to Hammerland capital, trigger financial retaliation, invite rivals to test weakened ground, create media scrutiny. Proceeding would gradually transfer control, entangle operations, increase vulnerability for Claire and the twins, erode autonomy over time. The choice was already made. But moments before action always stretch. The officiant turned toward Kevin. "Do you, Kevin Jones, take?" He lifted his hand slightly. The room quieted, not dramatically, but noticeably. Kaisa's fingers tightened around her bouquet. Her expression didn't shift yet. "Before we continue," Kevin said evenly, voice carrying without raising volume, "there's information that needs to be acknowledged." A ripple moved through the seated guests. Kaisa glanced toward him. "This isn't the time," she murmured. "It's exactly the time," he replied quietly. He stepped slightly forward, breaking formation. Guests leaned in subtly. No one expected disruption. Not here. Not now. Kevin didn't rush. He didn't pace. He stood centered. "I entered this engagement believing it was a partnership built on mutual strength," he said clearly. "Over the past week, I've confirmed financial activity that contradicts that belief." Kaisa's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Her father shifted in his seat. Murmurs began. Kevin continued. "Offshore transfers from Hammerlund-controlled entities have been directed into rival syndicates, actively testing my infrastructure." The air changed. Sharp, focused. Phones began vibrating discreetly as messages circulated. Kaisa leaned toward him slightly. "Be careful," she said under her breath. "I am," he replied. He turned to face the room fully. "This ceremony was designed to symbolize unity," he continued. "But unity cannot exist where acquisition is concealed as partnership." Silence. Heavy. Intent. He didn't accuse emotionally. He stated facts. Across the aisle, several investors began whispering urgently. Kaisa's composure thinned. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "No," he answered. "I'm correcting one." The officiant stood frozen. Guests waited. Kevin inhaled once, measured. "This wedding will not proceed." The words landed clean. No shouting, no theatrics, just termination. Gasps spread through the room. Cameras shifted position instinctively. Kaisa's father rose halfway from his seat. "This is inappropriate," he said sharply. Kevin met his gaze. "What's inappropriate," Kevin replied evenly, "is concealed acquisition." The room fractured into low, rapid conversation. Kaisa stepped back slightly, her eyes no longer calculating, now irritated. "You think this protects you?" she asked quietly. "It protects ownership," he answered. Outside, media representatives began receiving urgent alerts. Inside, alliances recalculated in real time. Kevin stepped away from the platform entirely. He didn't look back at the altar. He didn't look at the floral arrangements. He didn't look at the guests. He walked toward the exit with steady pace. Behind him, the image of strategic unity collapsed without noise, but not without impact. Kevin had nearly reached the estate doors when Kaisa's voice cut through the rising noise. "Kevin." He stopped, not out of hesitation, out of control. He turned slowly. Guests were no longer whispering politely. Conversations were urgent now. Phones held at chest level, screens lighting faces in quick flashes. Kaisa stepped down from the platform, gown flowing behind her, composure sharpened back into place. "You're framing this as betrayal," she said clearly enough for those nearest to hear. "That's inaccurate." Kevin didn't raise his voice. "It's documented." Her father moved forward from the front row, expression tight but contained. "If you have concerns," he said firmly, "this is not the venue." Kevin met his gaze. "This is precisely the venue. You selected it for symbolism." Silence thickened again. Kaisa tilted her head slightly. "You've always respected strategy," she said. "Why abandon it publicly?" "I haven't abandoned it," Kevin replied. "I've completed it." A murmur moved across the room. One of the media representatives near the back stepped toward the aisle, phone pressed to his ear. Kevin reached into his jacket pocket. Not dramatically, deliberately. He withdrew his phone and glanced at the screen. Then he looked back at Kaisa. "It's already in motion," he said. Her eyes narrowed. "What is?" Full disclosure. Several guests' phones buzzed simultaneously. A ripple of vibration, then another. Heads lowered toward screens. Brows tightened. Whispers turned sharper. Kaisa's father reached for his own phone. Kevin watched calmly. "Financial documentation has been delivered to federal investigators this morning," Kevin said clearly. "Transfers, shell corporations, coordinated investments tied to political land acquisitions and rival syndicates." Gasps were no longer subtle. One investor near the aisle stepped backward, shaking his head slowly. "This is reckless," Kaisa said quietly. "No," Kevin replied. "Reckless is assuming immunity." Her father's composure cracked slightly. "You think this spares you?" "It doesn't," Kevin said evenly. "It exposes everyone involved." That sentence shifted the atmosphere. Kevin wasn't positioning himself as separate. He was acknowledging shared impact. Phones continued buzzing, news alerts spreading faster than whispers could contain. Outside the estate gates, reporters began pushing forward against barriers as confirmation texts circulated. Inside, alliances recalculated visibly. One political donor slipped quietly toward a side exit. Another began typing rapidly. Kaisa stood still. "You're detonating a partnership that would have secured you for decades," she said. "I'm refusing absorption," Kevin replied. "You're exposing your own network. I've already begun restructuring it." That detail unsettled her. "You anticipated this?" "Yes." Within minutes, one of the media representatives inside the room received direct confirmation. He stepped forward cautiously. "Mr. Jones," he said, voice slightly unsteady. "Federal authorities have acknowledged receipt of financial documentation tied to Hammarlund Offshore Holdings." The room shifted from disbelief to calculation. Kaisa's father's phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. He answered briefly, stepping aside, voice low but urgent. Kevin didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He stood steady. Kaisa looked at him differently now. Not as partner. Not as acquisition. As adversary. "You coordinated this carefully," she said quietly. "Yes." "Because of Claire?" she asked. "No," he replied. "Because of clarity." She studied him. "You could have confronted this privately and allowed you to reposition quietly?" he asked. Her silence confirmed the answer. Guests began moving toward exits in controlled urgency. No one wanted to be visibly aligned as news spread. The string quartet had stopped playing entirely. The officiant stood awkwardly near the podium, uncertain whether to remain or leave. Kevin stepped slightly closer to Kaisa. "This was never a merger," he said evenly. "It was consolidation." "You think you're immune to fallout?" she asked. "No." "Then why do it here?" "Because acquisition thrives in silence." Her jaw tightened. "You're not as protected as you believe. Neither are you." Her father returned, face hardened. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "I know," Kevin replied. The moment was no longer about a wedding. It was about visible rejection of institutional control. Kevin turned toward the guests one final time. "I won't proceed under false alignment," he said clearly. "Anyone tied to concealed funding structures should review their positions immediately." It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Silence followed. Heavy. Then movement. Rapid and strategic. Kevin stepped back from the platform entirely. Kaisa remained standing where the altar had been prepared. White gown. Unfinished ceremony. Cameras catching everything now. Her expression wasn't shattered. It was sharpened into calculation. "You've made an enemy," she said softly. Kevin met her gaze. "I chose ownership." He turned and walked toward the exit again. This time no one called after him. Outside, reporters shouted questions as soon as he stepped beyond the estate doors. "Mr. Jones, is it true you canceled the ceremony? Are federal investigations underway? Is the Hammarlund banking family implicated?" Kevin did not answer. He walked past them, face composed. He entered his car and closed the door. For a moment, silence surrounded him. Then his phone buzzed again. Messages flooding in. Associates questioning. Rivals probing. Financial alerts shifting. He placed the phone face down. The public break was complete. The illusion of seamless power alignment was gone. In its place stood consequence. But consequence, unlike absorption, could be managed. Kevin started the engine. The estate behind him no longer represented expansion. It represented exposure. And he had chosen it. By the time Kevin reached downtown Houston, the financial tremor had already begun. 3 scheduled calls were canceled before he even stepped into his office. One investor sent a short message, "We need clarity before continuing." Another withdrew from a pending infrastructure project without explanation. He expected that. Public rejection carries cost. He entered his office and closed the door without calling anyone in. Screens across his desk displayed shifting numbers, market reactions, media headlines, speculation linking his name to federal review, even though he had initiated disclosure. The distinction wouldn't matter to outsiders. He sat down slowly. He wasn't shaken. He was calculating. Phone vibrating again. This time he answered. "You just destabilized half the board," one associate said sharply. "I removed an internal threat," Kevin replied evenly. "You did it publicly." "Yes. You look exposed." "I was exposed." Silence. The associate didn't argue further, because they both knew the truth. Silence would have allowed quiet takeover. Noise forced alignment. Kevin ended the call. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling briefly. He had chosen impact over insulation. Now he had to absorb it. Within 24 hours, 2 more partnerships suspended activity pending clarification. Credit tightened. Capital access shifted. Rumors began circulating that Kevin's empire was contracting faster than expected. In reality, he had already begun contraction. The wedding merely made it visible. A financial analyst sent projections showing short-term losses that would sting deeply. Kevin studied them without flinching. Profit had been his measure for years. Now survival and autonomy mattered more. His phone buzzed again. Kaisa. He ignored it. Minutes later, a message from her instead. "You underestimated retaliation." He read it once, then deleted it. Retaliation wasn't a surprise. It was anticipated. He opened a secure channel and issued 2 instructions. Increase internal auditing on all external capital flows. Reassign oversight from previously shared financial corridors. No theatrics, just containment. The following evening, another gray vehicle passed Claire's street. Not stopping this time, just slow enough to signal presence. Kevin was informed within minutes. He drove again, alone. Not to confront aggressively, to signal awareness. The car did not return. But whispers continued across his network. He's weakened. He's distracted. Family changed him. Kevin didn't counter publicly. He adjusted quietly. He consolidated loyal segments of his structure into tighter circles. Less surface, more precision. The rivals weren't attacking outright. They were measuring reaction, waiting for fracture. He refused to give them one. Claire did not attend the wedding. She heard about it the way most of Houston did, through headlines and notifications. Ceremony halted. Financial investigation expands. Strategic merger collapses. She sat at her kitchen table while Kai colored and Taylor lined up books by size. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from acquaintances. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned off the screen. She wasn't interested in spectacle. She was interested in pattern. That evening, Kevin knocked on her door. No convoy, no press trailing, just him. She opened slowly. "You look tired," she said. "I am." Kai ran toward the doorway immediately. "Did you get married?" he asked bluntly. Kevin crouched slightly. "No." "Why?" "Because it wasn't right." Kai accepted that with simple logic and ran back to the living room. Taylor watched from a distance, observant as always. Claire stepped aside and allowed Kevin inside. "Kevin, I ended it." They stood in the kitchen while the twins played in the next room. "It's over," Kevin said. "With her?" Claire asked. "Yes." "Publicly?" "Yes." Claire held his gaze carefully. "You could have walked away quietly." "I didn't want quiet." "Why?" "Because quiet would have protected her leverage." Claire studied his expression. "And loud protects what?" Ownership. She crossed her arms lightly. And us? Kevin didn't hesitate. Yes. She watched him for signs of ego. She didn't see any. You understand this increases pressure, she said. Yes. You understand rivals will test harder. Yes. You understand capital access tightens. Yes. And you still did it. Yes. The repetition wasn't defensive. It was steady. Claire exhaled slowly. Love costs. You think this proves something? She asked quietly. It proves alignment. She shook her head slightly. Alignment isn't proven once. It's proven over time. I know. You made a public move, she continued. Now comes the part that's not public. He nodded. Contraction. Consistency, she corrected. Silence lingered. Then she stepped closer. Love costs, she said evenly. He held her gaze. I'm paying. That's not how it works. Then explain. She didn't soften her tone. It costs ego. It costs control. It costs convenience. It costs image. He absorbed each word. And if you're not willing to lose those, she added, then this was just performance. He shook his head once. It wasn't performance. Then prove it quietly. From the living room, Kai shouted, It fell! Kevin moved instinctively toward the sound. Claire watched him. He knelt beside the collapsed block structure and began rebuilding with Kai patiently. Taylor handed him pieces without instruction. No cameras, no audience, just small hands and uneven blocks. Claire stood in the kitchen doorway. The headlines outside painted him as volatile. The rivals painted him as weakened. The financial sector painted him as unstable. But what mattered was happening on her living room floor. Kevin looked up briefly and met her eyes. No speech, no dramatic vow, just presence. For the first time since the streetlight blinked weeks ago, she saw something that felt consistent. Not perfect, not finished, but committed. Outside, Houston continued moving. Deals shifting, alliances recalculating, pressure tightening. Inside, Kevin focused on stacking blocks without knocking them over, and that quiet action carried more weight than the estate ever had. The testing began subtly. A delayed shipment, a supplier backing out at the last minute, 2 mid-level associates requesting meetings with competitors. Nothing dramatic, but intentional. Kevin expected it. When visible alliances collapse, opportunists circle. He didn't retaliate aggressively. He adjusted. He redirected shipping routes through slower but more reliable channels. He reduced dependence on volatile partners entirely. He tightened internal communication to smaller circles. A longtime associate confronted him directly. They think you're distracted, the associate said. Let them, Kevin replied. They're probing boundaries. Boundaries are clearer now. You're losing ground. Kevin didn't argue. Ground lost through reckless expansion was never stable to begin with. He leaned forward slightly. Shift focus to infrastructure projects already under contract, he instructed. Cut anything that requires intimidation to maintain. The associate frowned. That reduces margin. It reduces exposure. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. One afternoon, a rival group attempted to undercut a distribution route Kevin had paused weeks earlier. In the past, Kevin would have responded by squeezing them out aggressively. This time he did something different. He allowed them the contract. The margin wasn't worth the risk. Instead, he redirected capital toward a public redevelopment initiative in a neglected neighborhood, one Claire had once advocated for in her consulting work. The move confused observers. He's going soft, one competitor reportedly said. Kevin didn't respond. Softness and strategy are often confused by people who rely on volume. By letting the rival overextend into lower profit territory, Kevin preserved energy and avoided escalation. 3 months later, that rival struggled under overcommitment. Kevin didn't exploit their weakness publicly. He simply maintained distance. Growth through restraint. Kevin's calendar shifted gradually. Fewer late-night strategy sessions. More fixed Sunday commitments. One morning, he declined a high-value meeting scheduled during a school event Kai was participating in. An associate protested. This could secure a long-term advantage. Kevin replied simply, reschedule. He arrived at the school auditorium early. Kai spotted him from the stage and straightened visibly. Taylor waved once, before focusing on her lines. Kevin didn't clap louder than other parents. He didn't posture. He stayed seated, present. After the event, Kai ran toward him. "You saw it?" he asked. "I saw all of it." Taylor studied him closely. "You didn't check your phone," she observed. "No." She nodded approvingly. Small shifts, but consistent. Despite contraction, whispers never stopped entirely. A mid-level operator attempted to test Kevin by spreading rumor that his network was fragmenting. Instead of confrontation, Kevin invited him into a private meeting. No threats, no raised voices, just data. "You're free to pursue other opportunities," Kevin said evenly, "but do it cleanly." The operator blinked, surprised by the lack of intimidation. "Is that it?" he asked. "That's it. Control doesn't always require force. Sometimes it requires letting someone walk away without creating an enemy." The operator left. The rumor faded within weeks. Financial reports stabilized slowly, not soaring, not collapsing, lean, efficient. Kevin removed 2 more risky partnerships quietly. He refused short-term deals that demanded aggressive visibility. When questioned about his reduced footprint, he answered consistently, "Precision over volume." The phrase spread. Some mocked it. Others adapted. One evening, Claire stood in her kitchen reviewing paperwork when Kevin arrived for a scheduled visit. "You look less tense," she said. "I am. What changed?" "I stopped trying to defend everything." She studied him carefully. "And I started protecting only what matters." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she handed him a grocery bag. "Can you carry this inside?" He took it without commentary. No symbolism, just shared responsibility. Later, while helping Kai with homework, Kevin corrected a math mistake gently instead of impatiently. Taylor watched the exchange. "You didn't get mad," she said. "There was nothing to get mad about." Claire heard that from the hallway. Growth isn't loud. It's observable. Months passed. The expected collapse never came. Kevin's network became smaller but tighter. Rivals realized pushing aggressively no longer guaranteed reaction. Without reaction, escalation lost appeal. Testing slowed. Not because Kevin intimidated, because he refused to overextend. A competitor eventually approached indirectly to propose coexistence boundaries. Kevin agreed. No theatrics. Just lines drawn clearly. Late one evening, Kevin stood outside Claire's townhouse after the twins had fallen asleep. "You could have chosen dominance," she said quietly. "I did," he replied. She looked at him. "Not the way you think." He met her gaze. "I chose control over myself." That was the first time he framed it that way. Claire didn't smile. But she didn't challenge it either. The city still moved. Deals still happened. Money still flowed. But Kevin no longer chased expansion to prove relevance. He refined structure to preserve stability. And stability created something he had never truly experienced before. Quiet. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just ordinary tension. Kevin and Claire stood in the kitchen discussing logistics, school schedules, a minor contract Kevin had declined, financial restructuring that required temporary caution. Their voices weren't raised, but they were firm. "We can't assume stability equals safety," Claire said. "I'm not assuming," Kevin replied. "I'm planning." "You plan for risk. I plan for peace." "I am planning for peace. Through structure," she said. "Not presence." Kevin exhaled slowly. "Those aren't separate." From the hallway, a small thud interrupted them. They both turned. Kai stood halfway down the hall, frozen. He hadn't meant to be seen. His shoulders were tight. His eyes wide. Not scared of shouting. Scared of tension. Kevin felt it immediately. Not logically. Instinctively. Kai wasn't reacting to volume. He was reacting to atmosphere. Later that evening, Kai didn't sit beside Kevin the way he usually did. He chose the far end of the couch. Answered questions with short replies. Avoided eye contact. Kevin noticed. Claire noticed too. After bedtime routines, Claire stepped into the kitchen, while Kevin lingered near the living room. "He heard us," she said quietly. "I know. He didn't need to. I know." Claire didn't accuse. She just stated reality. Kevin walked down the hallway and paused outside Kai's room. The door was slightly open. Kai lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Kevin knocked lightly. "Can I come in?" Kai hesitated, then nodded. Kevin sat on the edge of the bed. Silence, stretched. Kai didn't look at him. "Did I do something?" Kai asked finally. The question landed hard. "No," Kevin said immediately. "You sounded mad." "I wasn't mad at you." Kai swallowed. "You leave when people get mad." Kevin felt something tighten in his chest. "When have I left?" he asked gently. Kai shrugged slightly. Before, not recently. Before." Kevin understood. Absence leaves imprint. Even if children don't remember details, they remember feelings. Kevin leaned back slightly. "I used to leave when things got complicated," he admitted quietly. Kai turned his head slightly toward him. "But I'm not leaving now." "How do I know?" Kai asked. "Because children don't accept promises without proof." Kevin thought carefully. "You don't know yet," he said honestly. "You'll see." Kai studied him. "You didn't yell," Kai said. "No, but you sounded tight." Kevin nodded slowly. "I'm still learning." "Learning what?" "How to stay calm when I feel pressure." Kai considered that. "I don't like when it feels tight," he said softly. Neither did Kevin. Instead of offering reassurance immediately, Kevin did something he rarely did in his life before. He stayed quiet. He didn't fix. He didn't explain strategy. He didn't defend himself. He simply stayed seated. Kai shifted slightly closer. "You're not going somewhere?" he asked. "No, even if it's hard?" "Yes." That word carried more weight than the one at the park weeks ago, because now it addressed fear. Kevin reached out slowly. "Can I sit here a little?" Kai nodded. They sat in silence. No dramatic reconciliation, just presence. Claire stood in the hallway for a moment, watching quietly before returning to the kitchen. She didn't interrupt. The next morning, Kevin arrived earlier than usual. He made breakfast awkwardly but persistently. Burned the first batch of toast. Tried again. Kai entered the kitchen slowly. "You're still here," he said. "Yes." Kai sat down without commentary. Taylor joined moments later, studying Kevin's movements carefully. "You didn't leave after the argument," she said. "No." "Are arguments allowed?" she asked. "Yes." "Even loud ones?" "We'll try not to make them loud." Taylor nodded thoughtfully. "Were you busy before?" she asked. The question was direct. Kevin didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Too busy?" "Yes." "For us?" He paused briefly. "For everything." Taylor processed that. "And now?" "Less. Because you want to?" "Yes." She accepted that with a small nod, not fully convinced, but listening. Later that evening, Kai approached Kevin while Claire was folding laundry. "I built something," Kai said quietly. "In your room?" "In my head." Kevin crouched to eye level. "What is it?" "A rule." "Tell me." "If grown-ups argue, they have to stay." Kevin swallowed. "That's a good rule. You'll follow it?" "Yes." Claire looked up from across the room. She didn't speak, but she watched Kevin's face carefully. He wasn't reacting defensively. He wasn't minimizing. He was absorbing. Kevin extended his hand. "Deal?" Kai placed his small hand into Kevin's. "Deal." That handshake carried more permanence than any contract Kevin had ever signed. Because this time, the commitment wasn't financial. It was behavioral. Taylor walked over and wrapped her arms briefly around Kevin's waist. "You're different," she said. "How?" "You don't look like you're about to leave." He held her gently. "I'm not." Claire stepped closer. She didn't praise him. She didn't congratulate him. She simply said, "Consistency." Kevin nodded. "I know." That night, when Kevin left the townhouse, Kai didn't watch him anxiously from the window. He waved casually and returned to his blocks. Trust wasn't fully restored, but it was forming. And unlike empire, trust can't be forced. It has to be earned repeatedly. Kevin walked to his car slowly. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt responsible. And responsibility, he finally understood, was heavier than power. but far more grounding. A year changes things, not through dramatic transformation, through repetition. Kevin no longer checked Claire's street for unfamiliar cars. Not because risk vanished, because structure tightened. The rivals adjusted to his narrowed footprint. Financial streams stabilized at lower but steadier levels. The Hammerlund name appeared periodically in ongoing legal discussions, but Kaisa no longer reached out. Silence can signal distance, and distance, sometimes, is peace. On a mild late summer evening, Kevin stood at the edge of downtown Houston holding Kai's hand. Claire stood on his other side, Taylor gripping her fingers while balancing on one foot impatiently. Traffic hummed. People moved in predictable patterns. The intersection ahead looked ordinary, but Kevin recognized it immediately. The same crosswalk, the same streetlight. 1 year earlier, that light had blinked twice and shifted everything. They approached the curb together. No tinted windows, no security scanning corners, just 4 people waiting for a signal. Kai tugged Kevin's sleeve. "Race you across," he whispered. "Not until it's white," Kevin replied. Taylor rolled her eyes slightly. "He always says that," she told Claire. "Because he's right," Claire answered calmly. Kevin glanced up at the streetlight. It flickered once, paused, then flickered again before stabilizing. The same rhythm. Kai looked up. "Why does it do that?" he asked. Kevin considered the question. "Sometimes it checks itself," he said. "For what?" Taylor asked. "To make sure it's working." Kai nodded seriously, accepting that explanation. Claire glanced at Kevin briefly. He didn't look tense. He didn't look distracted. He looked present. The crosswalk sign shifted to white. They stepped forward together. Kevin adjusted his pace to match Kai's shorter stride. Taylor leaned slightly toward Claire, narrating something about a book she was reading. Kevin listened, not partially, fully. Halfway across the street, a car honked lightly at another driver. Kai squeezed Kevin's hand instinctively. Kevin squeezed back, not reflexively, intentionally. On the opposite curb, they stepped onto the sidewalk without rush. No one watched them differently. No one whispered. They were just a family crossing a street. Later that evening, they sat at a small outdoor table near a cafe. Kai insisted on explaining how his new class project worked. Taylor corrected minor details without hesitation. Claire listened while stirring her drink. Kevin absorbed every word. A notification buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen briefly. An update regarding a minor contract adjustment. He turned the phone face down. Taylor noticed. "You don't check it a lot anymore," she said. "I don't need to," he replied. She nodded as if confirming something internally. Kai leaned back in his chair. "Are we doing this next year too?" he asked. "What?" Kevin asked. "Walking." Kevin smiled slightly. "Yes." Claire met his eyes across the table. Not romantic, not dramatic, just understanding. As they stood to leave the cafe, Kevin paused slightly and looked down at Kai and Taylor. "You know something?" he said. "What?" Kai asked. "People think big things matter most." Taylor tilted her head. "What actually matters?" she asked. Kevin glanced briefly at Claire, then back at the twins. "Showing up." Kai nodded. "That's easy." Kevin almost laughed. "It's not," he said softly. Claire stepped closer. "Tell them what you used to think," she said. Kevin looked at the twins. "I used to think winning meant controlling everything." Taylor frowned slightly. "That sounds tiring." "It was." Kai tugged his hand. "You don't look tired now." "I'm not." He paused, then added gently, "If you've ever built something and realized you forgot why you started, don't wait too long to fix it." He didn't look at a camera. He didn't deliver it like a speech. He said it like a man speaking to 2 children who deserved honesty. "And if you believe in second chances," he continued quietly, "hold on to them. They don't come often." Claire watched him carefully. No performance, no ego, just truth. They walked back toward the intersection again, heading home. The streetlight blinked twice once more before steadying. Kevin stopped briefly. Kai looked up. "It's checking again," he said. Kevin nodded. "Sometimes the light blinks twice to see who's paying attention." Taylor squeezed Claire's hand. "We are," she said. Kevin felt the weight of that. Not heavy like responsibility used to feel. Grounded. The city continued behind them. Deals would rise and fall. Markets would shift. Power would move between hands. But Kevin no longer chased expansion to outrun fear. He built smaller, stronger, intentional. As they crossed together under steady light, there was no convoy, no strategic merger, no absorption, just four shadows moving forward at the same pace. And that, finally, was enough.